I'll take it, Your Honor. Thank you. Morning. I didn't get a chance to say anything yesterday. My name is Thad Mueller. I'm Assistant District Attorney. I've been with the DA's office about 10 years. Not about 10 years, 10 years. First 3 years I covered Calvin and Chickasaw County, so tried many cases down here. I'm covering Chippewa County now. This is, as the judge said, opening statement. This is just my opportunity and the defense's opportunity to just tell you a little bit about the case. What we anticipate on presenting is evidence. You're going to hear from several witnesses. You're going to hear from family members of Kirby Carpenter. You're going to hear from law enforcement from Chippewa County, Mississippi. You're going to hear from law enforcement in Smith County, Virginia, who handled the latter part of the investigation. You're going to hear from a person from an officer from the Ripon Police Department who was involved in this. You're going to see evidence from phone extractions or phone dumps, as they're commonly called. You're going to see photographs that we're going to publish some of them on the television so you can get a clearer view. It's a lot easier than just passing around a photograph among you so you can all see it at once. You'll see a few videos and other documentary evidence. All this evidence will be presented to you over the next couple of days. And your job as the jury, as you were told yesterday by the judge and during the voir dire, is you're the trier of fact. All right? You judge the credibility of the witnesses. Who do you believe? Who do you not believe? And importantly, you judge the weight of the evidence. What evidence is important to you in making your decision? What evidence is important to you? And when the proof is all in, when we've rested, the defense is rested, the judge will charge you with the law. These are the laws as applicable to this crime that he's charged with, which is capital murder. And you will take those facts and apply them to the law, deliberate, and reach your conclusion, reach your verdict. Now, if I get this off the tape. Who was Kirby Carpenter? That's why we're here. Kirby's from Chippewa County, Mississippi. He's the son of Maddie Jane and Jared. He's a brother of 2 sisters, Casey and Wendy. He's got 3 other brothers. He was a father. He has 2 children, Enola and Towns. 2 small children. He's a Marine Corps veteran, a musician, an outdoorsman, an entrepreneur, a businessman who owns several businesses in and around Chippewa County, Mississippi. He dabbled in a lot of things. Sold antique cars, sold coins. He had a business in Ripley called North Mississippi Gold, Silver, and Coin Exchange. He was really, the proof will show he was a self-made man. Everything he made himself. And the proof will also show that he was financially successful in doing this. Now, he was killed, the proof will show, on November 30th of 2022 at around 7 p.m. at his home. He was shot with a shotgun, killed with buckshot wounds to the neck and the chest. The proof will show that. After he was shot, the proof will show he was drugged from his garage and around the side of the house and covered with a curtain or a tarp that was secured by a toolbox from a pickup truck that was empty and light. That's security. His body was not discovered until 12:30, about 2 days later, on the 2nd day of December of 2022. His body was discovered by Caitlin, who was the mother of Enola and who lived at the residence. Now, a little background on the Spences. Jeff and Karen Spence, Jeff being the defendant, Karen being his wife, are from Pennsylvania. They had 2 daughters, Carolyn and Caitlin. Raised their kids in Pennsylvania. Carolyn goes to college, graduates, moves to North Carolina, and the Spences migrate down and move in with them. Follow them to Virginia, where they move in with them also. Proof's going to show that relationship soured. Now, Caitlin found her way to Mississippi because she went to vet school at Mississippi State. After that was over, over. She didn't finish. She ended up working for Tractor Supply in Booneville. She met Kirby Carpenter in about 2020. The Tractor Supply store that she worked at was close to a liquor store that Kirby owned and operated, one of his many businesses in Booneville, and they began a relationship. They moved in together, and in July of 2022, their child, Manola, was born. The Spences, Jeff and Karen, who by this time were estranged from Carolyn and her family, moved in to help out with the baby. The families, the Carpenters, and the Spences all spent Thanksgiving of 2022 together. According to Kaylin's testimony, Jeff and Karen Spence left on November 29th between 1 and 3 p.m. They lived in Saltville, Virginia, which is a small town in the southwest corner of Virginia. It's about an 8 to 9 hour drive from the location where they lived in Tippah County, which is fairly close to Ripley. Now, the proof's going to show that on the 30th day of November, which is the significant day because that's the day Kirby was murdered, that Caitlin got up about 5:30 in the morning to go to work. Her parents had gone, and she had to make arrangements for Noah. All right, so she had a friend in Booneville whose name was Bailey Reese. So she gets up at 5:30, she leaves, she gets ready for work, gets to Noah, leaves the house. Testimony will be that Kirby was asleep in the bed at 5:30 in the morning, or 6 o'clock when she left. She drops Noah off with Bailey, and I believe she goes to Memphis to do some work. Throughout the day, and we'll show this through the phone extractions, the phone dumps, Kirby and Caitlin are exchanging texts. You know, where are you? The proof's going to show that Kirby went to Kroger in Corinth and bought some lamb chops and other groceries. They're exchanging texts. Caitlin goes back to Booneville, picks up a Noah. We can confirm that she was at Walmart in Booneville at 7:31. She stays in the parking lot, breastfeeds her baby, and gets home about 8 to 8:30 that night. Now again, the proof will show that Kirby was shot about 7:15 on the 30th. Now, Kirby's body is discovered by Caitlin at 12:30 on 12/2/22. So what happens on 12/1? Well, text will show that nobody knows where Kirby is. She's texted, "Where are you? Are you in the deer stand? I'm worried. I've got to take Noah to the doctor." So all these texts reported to show that she's trying to find him. At 12:30, she's on the phone with Maddie Jane, who's Kirby's mother, and she's worried out of her mind. And Maddie Jane is going to call the sheriff. 12:30, Caitlin discovers the body. 911 call. Law enforcement comes out, and the investigation ensues. The investigation continued over the summer. It reached a point in November 30th, exactly 1 year to the date. The Spences had gone back to Virginia following Kirby's memorial service, which was on December 17th of 2022. They went back, the proof's going to show they went back to Virginia on the 20th of December of 2022. Did not return to Mississippi until they were arrested in Virginia and brought back. And here we sit. Now, the investigation in Virginia is significant. Virginia law enforcement, namely Brad Johnson, who you'll hear from probably tomorrow, conducted an investigation of numerous bank boxes that had been opened by the defendant, Mr. Spence. And And the proof's going to show that in those bank boxes were personal items that belonged to Kirby Carpenter. Now, Kirby was known to carry a satchel that contained a lot of money that was in standard course, and also carried a firearm, which is not unusual for somebody who carries a lot of cash. And the satchel never was found. The gun was never found. There were bullets in his pockets, but the gun was never found. And we will prove that Mr. Spence took items from Kirby, personal items, including that we'll be able to show through the bank box searches when he killed Kirby. Now later on, and I'm kind of jumping back and forth, after the body was discovered, the Spences came back to Mississippi on the 3rd. Remember, they left on the 20th. They came back on the 3rd, and proof will show that on the 4th, that Mr. Spence was taking bags of silver coins and placing them in his cabin. And you will hear proof that items that Kirby dealt with, gold, silver, collectible coins, and other memorabilia, because he collected everything, were discovered in Virginia. No doubt some of them were taken after the murder, but some were taken the night after the murder. Now, Jeff Spence's defense is, hey, I wasn't there. I left on the 29th between 1 and 3. Didn't come back to the 3rd. We'll prove otherwise. Now again, it's your job to judge the evidence. Our case that we put on, we invite you to judge the evidence. Judge the credibility of the witnesses. Judge the evidence that we put on. And in the end, we're going to ask you to return a guilty verdict against Mr. Spence for the murder of Kirby Carpenter on November 30th of 2022. Thanks.
All right, good morning, everybody. Now, yesterday, the state told you that this case was going to be about a dysfunctional family. And they're right about that. But that family is not Jeff and the Spences. That's actually Kirby's family. You're going to hear proof that the day Caitlin found her boyfriend's body, that Kirby's mom, Maddie Jane Jones, was over hours later at the house with some of her friends and whoever else. And while Caitlin was grieving, Maddie Jane and her friends were going through every piece of property that Kirby owned. They were opening safes, they were taking guns, they were taking cash, they were taking who knows what else, guitars, stealing everything of value. Now, the day Kirby Carpenter was killed, Jeff was in Virginia. He was in Virginia with his wife. And when they heard news, when Caitlin called them, told them what happened, the next day they came down to Tippah County. And when they got there, what they saw was Maddie Jane and all these other people who barely even talked to Kirby when he was alive were looting his house, ransacking. And you're going to hear about how Jeff, and actually one of Kirby's friends, called the police, told them what was going on, changed the locks to the house so those people couldn't get in, and had to change the code to the safe so those people would stop stealing Kirby's things. I don't think you're going to hear any proof from any witness from that stand that Jeff Spence put a bunch of coins in his car. That's what Maddie Jane tells the police, the one who's stealing her son's things. Now, eventually Maddie Jane, a couple days later, tells Caitlin that Caitlin and Enola, her 4-month-old daughter, they need to go. They got to get out of the house. It's not their house. So after Kirby's funeral, the Spences leave. They get a U-Haul, put Caitlin's things in there, and they go back to Virginia. Maddie Jane knows that Caitlin must have had something to do with this. And you'll hear from Caitlin. You can be the judge of that. The problem is, Caitlin's on camera breastfeeding her baby at Walmart around the time Kirby was killed. So Maddie Jane, who I think you're going to hear, pretty much ran this investigation. Maddie Jane turns her attention to Jeff. Says, well, Jeff must have had something to do with it. Now, a couple things about Kirby. He is good at making money. He's bought and sold liquor stores. He owned a few houses around town and he rented out. He's basically buying and selling anything he can get his hands on. Precious metal, gold, things like that. Anything. Anything somebody's buying or selling, he's buying or selling. Now, Kirby also, you're going to hear, did some business with some seedy people. He did some business with gang members. He ripped some people off. Before he was murdered, he passed off a bunch of fake diamonds as real, sold those to some guys from Chattanooga. I don't know if that was ever investigated, but you'll hear about it. You'll hear about a guy that Kirby sold a liquor store to. A guy named Ray Palmer, who owed Kirby over $100,000. And a week or so before Kirby was killed, Kirby went and talked to a lawyer to file a lawsuit to sue Ray Palmer for this $100,000. You're going to hear that Ray Palmer and Kirby had a conversation about 24 hours before he was killed, where Ray Palmer threatened Kirby, threatened him and his family, said, this is the kind of money that people get hurt over. 24 hours later, Kirby's dead. Ray Palmer, never investigated. There's another guy you're going to hear about. David Hancock threatened to shoot Kirby in the street. Scared Kirby so bad that he actually wrote it down. Here's what happened. Here's what David Hancock told me. Never investigated. You're going to hear a lot of proof of drug sales. You're going to hear that Kirby was selling a lot of meth, selling a lot of pills, and buying meth and pills in bulk. Affiliated with a lot of dangerous people. People who were never, ever, ever investigated. Never. And that's because Maddie Jane was convinced that it was Jeff. And there's no proof whatsoever that Jeff was even in Mississippi when Kirby was killed. And Maddie Jane is frustrated with this investigation because it goes on for a few months and nothing's done about it. She gets on Facebook, tries to solve this case herself. And you're going to hear from Chris McAllister probably today, who's the lead investigator of this case, and he's under a lot of pressure from Maddie Jane. And finally, about a year after Kirby was murdered, they get a break in the case. And that's because of a guy named David Barnes. Now, David Barnes was a very good friend of Kirby Carpenter. David Barnes also had a pretty bad meth and pill problem. He was an addict. And almost a year after Kirby was killed, David Barnes gets arrested for breaking into 4 local businesses. And that changes everything. Because David Barnes has a problem. He already has at least 5 felonies on his record. So he's looking at life in prison. And the day he's arrested, close to life in prison. So the day David Barnes is brought in, and they ask him about these burglaries, they interrogate him for 3 hours. And David Barnes would later say that he was high on meth for that entire 3-hour interview. He talks to Chris McAllister. He tells him about he and Kirby's drug dealing. He tells him about how he, would go with Kirby and they would buy a bunch of drugs and Kirby would sell them at Lake Mohawk. They pressed David Barnes. We know you know something about Kirby's death. We know you know who did it. Spence did it, didn't they? David Barnes, after 3 hours, doesn't say anything. He said, I don't know who killed my friend. He gets arrested. The next day, they talk to David Barnes for 2 more hours. We know you're involved in this somehow, David. Did you drag the body? We know you had something to do with this. We know you know. Tell us what you know, David. You can be a suspect or you can save yourself. And finally, David Barnes breaks down and starts crying. And he says, last year at Kirby's funeral, Caitlin came up to me in the middle of the funeral and she said, my dad killed Kirby. And Jeff is standing right there. And according to David Barnes, Jeff says something like, yeah, you'll be next if you tell anybody. You would think this proof would be corroborated, that they would talk to some other people. Did anybody see David Barnes and Caitlin talking to each other in the middle of Kirby's funeral? You would think they would check that out. But nope. 4 or 5 days after David Barnes says this, they put out arrest warrants for capital murder for Caitlin, for Karen, for Jeff. All of them. Based on what David Barnes said after a 5-hour interview when he's looking at close to life in prison. Now the problem is, they can't convict Jeff based on what a 5-time convicted felon and a drug addict said Caitlin told him a year ago. They need more proof than that. So they have all the Spences arrested, charged with capital murder. And now they go through those bank boxes that Mr. Mueller just told you about. And they find cash, and they find coins. And they find a lot of other stuff in those bank boxes. And they say, well, Kirby had cash, and Kirby had coins. And Jeff has cash and coins, so they must belong to Kirby. And Jeff must have stole those from Kirby after he killed him. Those are the dots they're trying to connect. The problem is, the investigators can't tell you where any of the stuff in the bank boxes came from, when it got in the bank boxes, or who it belonged to. And pay close attention when we start talking about these bank boxes. Some of those items were there long before Kirby was killed. A lot of the state's proof is based on the proof they don't have. You're going to hear about Jeff's phone. There was no activity on the day of the murder. Pay close attention to that part too, when we start talking about Jeff's phone. Because they extracted all the phones. They extracted Jeff's phone, Karen's phone, Kirby's phone, Caitlin's phone. They've got all the phones. So, Caitlin's arrested too. And after she sits in jail for about 1.5 years, she goes and talks to the investigators with her lawyer. And for the first time in 2.5 years since Kirby's killed, she goes, my dad kind of implied that he killed Kirby. After she says that, she gets right out of jail. And you're going to hear from her this week. There are so many people who had motive, who had opportunity to kill Kirby Carpenter. So many people who wanted to see him harmed. Those people were never, ever investigated. The only people who were investigated were the Spences. It is going to be impossible for them to prove to you that Jeff had anything to do with this. Because again, Jeff was in Virginia when Kirby was killed. And you will see that at the end of this trial.